Duncan Hunter and his wife have their day in court. After a not guilty plea, we look at where the case goes from here. Outside of the courthouse, protest and politics. Hunter's opponent in the race for the 50th talks about the shakeup in the campaign. Major changes are ahead for Horton Plaza, how the new owners plan to transform the property over the next couple of years. And California is one signature away from becoming the first state to limit the use of plastic straws. What this could mean for restaurants and customers. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Duncan Hunter and Margaret Hunter pleaded not guilty today in federal court. The congressman and his wife are fighting charges related to the alleged misspending of campaign money. We have team coverage tonight, starting with KPBS reporter Jade Hyman.
Duncan Hunter and his wife, Margaret, pled not guilty today in court to charges they used campaign funds to bankroll a lavish lifestyle.
Congressman Duncan Hunter and his wife, Margaret, who were noticeably tense inside the courtroom, pleaded not guilty to charges of using $250,000 of campaign money on personal expenses. The two made little eye contact and sat several seats from each other before standing together in front of the judge. During the arraignment, their attorneys made the case for a low bond, citing their poor financial condition and low flight risk. After the hearing, Duncan Hunter walked out of court and straight to his car on $15,000 bond. His wife left out of a side door on $10,000 bond. Neither had comment. As one of many conditions of bond, Duncan Hunter, a known gun enthusiast, will have to turn in his guns by Monday. Other conditions of their bond include restricted travel and a requirement of full-time work. The Hunters' next day in court is set for September 4th for a motion hearing. Jade Hyman, KPBS News.
Outside the courtroom, a crowd of demonstrators rallied against the congressman. The group included the candidate who was running against Hunter in the 50th district. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has more.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
Protesters were yelling when he arrived, but Congressman Duncan Hunter seemed unconcerned Thursday.
Feeling good.
Have you talked to your wife this morning?
Yeah.
What did she say this morning?
Yeah, we took the kids to school.
Hunter walked to the entrance of the federal courthouse for his arraignment without his wife Margaret by his side.
How come you're coming separate from your husband today?
She came in a separate car and went in through a different entrance.
Your husband has said that you were in charge of his finances. Do you know if there was any wrongdoing?
But unlike the congressman, she did not answer any questions or have anything to say.
I think after almost 10 years of being in Washington, I think now he reeks of the swamp.
Hunter's Democratic challenger in November was also at the arraignment.
It's time that we have somebody who will represent what we're proud of in East County and North County.
Outside of the courthouse were a handful of protesters who say the campaign to unseat Hunter is growing.
So what we're going to be doing is field organizing, is getting people out to canvass, do a knock on neighbors' doors and let them know what happened here today, and to vote him out of office because we deserve better than this.
Hunter left his arraignment without making a statement. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Congressman Hunter's not guilty plea starts a legal process that could take months to play out. KPBS, a talk with Chuck LaBella, a former federal prosecutor, about the upcoming trial and potential outcomes for Hunter.
You're talking at least a year, I would assume, before this is all wrapped up. So I can't imagine this case going to trial before next summer. The defense may come out of the box and say, we want to go to trial right away. That could happen, but it's usually not the way these cases get played out. I got to tell you, it's a husband and wife, and this is a very odd conspiracy because in this conspiracy, unlike every conspiracy I've ever charged as 24 years as a prosecutor, you always say, A and B, the defendants, plus people known and unknown to the grand jury. This indictment very pointedly says that it's just Mr. and Mrs. Hunter who are the conspirators. So those are the only two co-conspirators in this case. And they're husband and wife. There's a husband and wife privilege. So there's layers of problems here that I see as a former prosecutor and opportunities as a current defense lawyer to raise some issues. There's definitely a possibility of a trial. I mean, you know, again, a lot of cases are resolved before trial, but from the noise that I'm hearing, certainly Duncan Hunter is going to trial. There always is a possible plea deal. I mean, many cases end up being disposed of before trial, so that is a common occurrence. In situations like this where there are political figures, it's less common. It's more common, I think, for the political figure to go to trial. Although Manafort wasn't a political figure, he was a person of notoriety and a quasi-political figure. Those people tend to go to trial. This is all going to be driven by the federal guidelines, the sentencing guidelines, and of course you know, at the end of the day, what the judge believes has been proven, what has not been proven. And so, I mean, you're just taking the indictment at face value at a loss of $250,000. I mean, you're talking several years of possible incarceration. You're talking probably 2 or 3 or 4 years of possible incarceration, beyond what the statute itself says. The mail fraud, wire fraud conspiracies all have, you know, their 5 years or 10-year statutes, but this is all going to be driven by the guidelines, which are, you know, tend to be less than that. I've spent 24 years prosecuting cases, and I've actually prosecuted campaign financing cases, so I know these sorts of cases pretty well. They are difficult cases to prove in some sense, because when you're alleging here, as they are alleging here, that there was a misuse of campaign funds, and it's not taking money from somebody that you shouldn't have taken money from or taking too much money from somebody. It's strictly, here are campaign funds that people gave me and I'm using them, and it's got to be pretty clear that it's not for campaign purposes. So there is a big gray area here, and there's a lot of arguments that could be made on several of these expenditures, I assume, and I'm sure the defense will make those arguments.
Even though he was under investigation, Congressman Hunter finished far ahead of the other candidates in the June primary. One of his opponents was Bill Wells, the mayor of El Cajon. Wells was interviewed this morning on NPR's Morning Edition. He talked about why he ran against Hunter and if anyone might be able to run a write-in campaign.
We felt that the district was in danger. We felt that people weren't taking the allegations against Congressman Hunter very seriously, and that we saw a scenario where the Justice Department could bring forth an indictment right about this time and put the district in a situation where a very conservative district, where about 15 points leaning towards a conservative, would end up becoming a Democrat seat because he would become indicted and not be able to be elected. But my main concern was that we would end up with a Democrat representative in this very conservative district, and I wanted to make sure that didn't happen. So I ran hoping that if an indictment came, it would come during the primary, but it didn't. And I was narrowly edged out of the second place spot, so I couldn't be on the ballot now, even if I wanted to be. The rules in California make it so that not anybody that didn't finish first or second in the primary can be on the ballot at all, even if they are in a write-in situation. So the only two names that can be on the ballot are Duncan Hunter and Kamala Najjar, the Democrat representative.
We will continue to follow this story on KPBS TV, radio, and online. You can find all of our coverage at kpbs.org. We have an update on the federal government's efforts to reunite immigrant families. More than 500 children remain separated from their parents. Most of these children have parents who were deported. Nonprofits like Justice in Motion found some parents in Guatemala and Honduras. Some parents say they were coerced or misled into agreeing to removal. The government and the ACLU will have a hearing tomorrow afternoon. A major hurricane is moving closer to Hawaii. Hurricane Lane has the potential to be the strongest storm to hit the island in 26 years. The Red Cross has already opened emergency shelters. FEMA says the Hawaiian Islands will feel the effects of the storm over the next few days. Officials also warn there is some uncertainty in the forecast. Daji Aswad has a closer look at the hurricane's track.
Hurricane Lane continues to track its way closer to Hawaii, bringing heavy bands of rain, and now is a major hurricane. That eye still away from the islands, but the bands of moisture, as we see here through this water vapor highlighted in the greens as well as blues and whites, indicating that moisture in the atmosphere continues to impact our islands here. As we head into the track, we notice pressing its way to the north and northwest, eventually going to be weakening into a storm, which we'll still be watching out for some very strong, damaging winds, tropical force winds here across much of Hawaii, at least until your Sunday. By Sunday night, that's when we're going to be watching for some improvements as the storm tracks its way towards the west. Life-threatening flash flooding, once again damaging winds, and the potential for very, very rough surf to continue here across the Hawaii coastline. The great news is we'll be gradually improving as Lane makes its way into some disruptive winds aloft. Stay tuned for more details on your San Diego forecast.
Horton Plaza's days as a shopping mall are coming to an end. The Union Tribune reports the deal was finalized today with Stockdale Capital Partners. The new owners plan to turn the downtown location into office space for tech companies. The process should be complete by the end of 2020. Some of the changes will require City Council approval. California is a step closer to limiting the use of plastic straws in restaurants. Lawmakers gave their final approval of the bill today, sending it to Governor Jerry Brown. The bill does not ban plastic straws outright. Customers would still be able to get one if they ask. Supporters of the bill say it will reduce pollution in oceans and waterways. Critics say it punishes small businesses. Repeat violators could be fined. Lawmakers from San Diego are working on a statewide clean energy plan. Assemblymember Todd Gloria is among those supporting a bill that calls for California to use 100% clean energy sources by the year 2045. The bill is a response to the Trump administration rolling back EPA regulations.
It's really time that we go towards a 100% clean energy if we're going to tackle the existential threat to our state, to our country, to our planet, which is climate change. If we're going to really grow this economy and reduce utility rates for everyday Californians, we have to go to 100% clean energy.
We need to transition away from dirty energy sources like coal and oil and toward a 100% clean energy future. And California really sets the stage for the rest of the country.
The Assembly is expected to vote on the bill next week. Major utility companies oppose the idea. They say it will add to their cost. Wildfires are forcing tourists to cancel plans to visit California. State tourism officials say the tourism industry took a $20 million hit last month. Visit California conducted a survey that showed 11% of travelers changed their plans due to the fires. Oregon and Washington are dealing with similar problems. Those states are working with California on a tourism campaign to ease concerns about wildfires. Firefighters in the Bay Area are blaming internet coverage for slowing down their wildfire efforts. As Capital Public Radio's Ben Bradford reports, this is now part of a larger debate over net neutrality.
During debate on the measure, Verizon lobbyist Heidi Barsulia called her company's treatment of the firefighters' data troubling.
This particular situation, however, has nothing to do with net neutrality.
Santa Clara County's fire chief disagrees in testimony added to a lawsuit against the Trump administration's repeal of net neutrality rules. It goes like this. While battling the Mendocino Complex fire, which is now the largest ever recorded in California, the firefighters' internet data slowed to unusable speeds. A series of emails included with the legal filing show a month-long back and forth as the fire department looked to restore internet and Verizon looked to upsell them on a more expensive plan. Verizon has called it a customer service error. The fire chief says the slowdown actively impeded fire response. Now, net neutrality is commonly talked about as a means of ensuring internet providers don't promote one company, say one they own, over a competitor. That's why Verizon calls this case unrelated. Stanford professor Barbara Van Schevick argues it's not.
Yeah, net neutrality is actually a lot broader than just protecting businesses.
Van Schevick has testified in favor of the California measure. She says the federal rules, repealed in June, allowed consumers to complain about deceptive practices and gave federal regulators wide latitude to investigate malfeasance.
If it had been in effect, then the Santa Clara Fire Department would have an avenue to ask for help in resolving this problem.
She says California's measure would allow the state attorney general to take up that role, although the bill still must receive approval from the full state assembly, state senate, Governor Jerry Brown, and after the inevitable lawsuits, the courts. At the state capitol, I'm Ben Bradford.
Reddit is a free website where millions of people can sound off on nearly anything. The Bay Area company attempts to protect free speech while fighting online bullying. KQED Newsroom's Thuy Vu talked with Reddit Vice President Melissa Tidwell.
Reddit is one of the most popular websites, not only in the U.S., but in the world, yet it doesn't have the same name recognition as, say, YouTube or Facebook. Why do you think that is?
You know, I think it's a couple of things. When I started the company in 2015, we were about 60 people, and now we're about 400. And so
That's
I think
hyper-growth.
It's a lot of growth, but you know, in comparison to sort of our user growth, we're an incredibly small company. So I think a lot of the things that we've tried to focus on is kind of building out the core functions that we need in order to sort of grow and really manage the platform the way that we want to. And also, I think it's just the nature of Reddit, right? It's a collection of communities that, as you said, are interested in a wide variety of topics. And so in terms of that, in terms of users sort of being out there and the brand perception, some users want to, you know, are doing interesting things for the world, and some users want to maintain their privacy and have that.
And as you've grown, you've had similar growing pains to other companies such as Facebook and Twitter, and that is the issue of how do you moderate for hate speech online? It's been a tricky issue. How do you balance Reddit users' right to free speech while monitoring and even shutting down hate speech?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're having a great conversation today on those questions. I think for Reddit, we are focusing on a couple of things. As I said, part of our growth is growing the company and growing the functions that we need to have for the company to be successful. So for us, that means we have an actual policy team now that thinks about these things from a big picture perspective. We have a trust and safety team, which are the enforcers, and that ensure that as we have policies, they can enforce at scale. We have the anti-evil engineering team, which are
That's what they're called, anti-evil engineering team.
Our current name. And so, you know, the team that they help us build the tools, right? So I have a partner in Chris Slow, who's our CTO, and we sit next to each other and we talk about, as we're thinking about policy issues, he's thinking about the technological solutions of how do we help it, how do we scale it when we have that number of users.
Do you have actual human beings who are reviewing these things and flagging them as Facebook is doing?
Yeah, well, the Reddit model is a little bit different, right? So for us, we have what we like to talk about as a federated system. So we have Reddit Inc., and we have the trust and safety team who enforces our content policy. We also have a community moderator team. They actually go into the communities, work with the moderators, ensure that they are growing healthy communities. And so then we have the moderators themselves. So as you mentioned, we have over 100,000 communities. Each of those communities are moderated, and they have their own additional rules. Okay. So as an example, you know, there are communities about cats, and sometimes you can only talk about cats. Okay. If you post a picture of a dog, they will enforce that rule.
So they kind of self-censor.
So each community has their own different rules of what they want in that community.
And speaking of rules and potential censorship, this week Twitter temporarily suspended Alex Jones. He's the founder of the far-right news site InfoWars. But some critics have argued that Twitter really should have gone further and ban InfoWars and Alex Jones outright, as Facebook and Apple and other companies have done. What is your take on that?
You know, I don't know the different policies always at each of the companies, and I think, you know, all of the tech companies are kind of struggling with where we are in the world today and kind of some of the things that have happened. You know, for us, we're really focused. InfoWars hasn't been on our site, you know, for a number of years.
And why is that? They just took themselves off, or you shut them down?
That we had a soft ban on the domain for people using it for spam and things of that nature. So it's just not a prevalent website on our community. And so, you know, I think, you know, what's important for us is that we all take a step back, think about the policy that you want to have as a company. All of the companies are different, have different goals, and ensure that we can enforce them, right? I think a lot of the pushback is that the public doesn't understand kind of what the policies are and how do you enforce them and why they are what they are. And so we have a different model. We communicate with our users a lot. In our post about why we're changing policies, what that means for them, and communities can go even further than what we've prescribed.
Let's talk about online bullying. How big of a problem is that on Reddit, and how do you fight that?
You know, it's a great question. We focus on sort of the behaviors of the users that we think add to this, right? So one of the things that I did when I came to the company in 2015 was to start to look at some of the policies that we had, and did they go far enough, as we talked about harassment and things of that nature. And over the course of, you know, 3 years, we've iterated on a lot of our policies to get to some of that behaviors to ensure that as we're seeing what's happening on our site, that we're thinking through, is this harassment? Is this not harassment? What happens when it's bilateral versus unilateral? Asking a lot of those hard questions and then making our own decisions. So I think the site has actually come a long way in terms of how it tolerates harassment and getting on top of it. A lot of what the trust and safety team does is when they have those rules, they can build mechanisms of which they can get some of this at scale. So we're not waiting for one-to-one reporting for somebody to say, this has happened to me, it's a problem. We are more actively looking for on the site those interactions to make sure that they're not happening.
Melissa Tidwell, General Counsel at Reddit, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump plays defense against suggestions he is implicated in the crimes of his former associates. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
We are watching an onshore flow ramp up here across the southwest, so we are going to notice a bit more cloud cover for your satellite and radar as we continue through tonight. As of now, on the tranquil side, back towards the Four Corners, noticing some monsoonal moisture. None of that's going to get in towards southwestern California. Here tonight, once again, a few clouds for San Diego as well as Oceanside with a low of 63. Some clouds getting into Borrego Springs with a low of 75 degrees and Mount Laguna cooling down to 58. Once we head into tonight, you're really going to notice that onshore flow bringing in a slight breeze here with the clouds building in and a low of 72. Now that onshore flow usually brings the cooler air, but the waters are warm as well, so we're not going to be looking at a huge cool down here in the metro, still a little bit above average for our nighttime lows. As we head into tomorrow, seasonal conditions for California, headed in towards Nevada as well, and remain dry. No weather systems to bring moisture into San Diego for your Friday. Plenty of sunshine. In those morning hours, that's where you're going to find the best bet for some cloud cover due to the onshore flow, but those will begin to burn off. And as we head into your day, plenty of sun in San Diego with a high of 80, 79 in Oceanside. Borrego Springs topping off at 105. And if you're in Mount Laguna, you'll see a high of 77. As we head into the weekend, not much changing for our forecast. Will remain seasonable, dry with that onshore flow, especially impacting us with clouds in the early mornings and in the late nights. As we continue across the nation here, we notice we'll have the majority of rain back towards the upper plains and the Great Lakes, but once again, not looking at any wet weather here at home. The coast, we are in the upper 70s for your extended forecast. And as you head inland, we'll also be remaining dry, mid to upper 80s for your Monday and Tuesday. Mountains in the mid to upper 70s with some sun and pleasant conditions and hot conditions in the triple digits for the desert. Back to you, Ebony.
A favorite musical returns, plus there's free music in Carlsbad and a day of books at Liberty Station. Here with more is KPBS Arts editor Nina Guerin.
The Masked Man returns. Broadway San Diego brings back Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera. The musical, which is the longest-running show in Broadway history, tells the story of a disfigured man who becomes obsessed with a beautiful soprano at the Paris Opera House. This version of the Gothic romance features updated staging and scenery, modern special effects, and of course, the legendary chandelier. Experience 3 days of adventurous music by the beach at the 15th Annual Carlsbad Music Festival. The event features more than 60 performances that range in style from classical and jazz to electronic and indie rock. You can see some of the many free performances happening at outdoor venues throughout downtown Carlsbad, or buy tickets for more intimate concerts with nationally established artists. The festival also has an artisan market, food court, and beer garden. The San Diego Festival of Books brings together readers, writers, and storytellers at this day-long event in Liberty Station. You'll be able to meet authors, illustrators, and publishers at Author Alley, or attend themed panels like military fiction and border stories that feature in-depth conversations with writers and reporters. There's a large area that features children's programming, including story readings, crafts, and exhibits specially crafted for them. And attention fans of KPBS's One Book One San Diego reading program. The selection for 2018 will be revealed at this event. For KPBS Arts, I'm Nina Guerin.
A Hollywood star wants to end childhood hunger in California. Jeff Bridges talked to kids who are worried about where their next meal will come from. This talk took place at the Sacramento Press Club. He works with No Kid Hungry, a group that helps feed kids around the nation.
I live in Santa Barbara, which I look at as almost a microcosm of our country. It's got incredibly wealthy people and people who are living in poverty. 1 in 6 kids in America are struggling with food insecurity. 1 in 5 in California. 1 in 4 in Santa Barbara.
He also talked about the need to support state and federal programs that provide affordable meals for children from low-income homes. You can find more of tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.